This is Progress Canada, presented by Lightbulb Narrative. Today we're joined by Ontario Liberal leadership hopeful Rob Cerjanec.
Thanks so much for joining me, Rob.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Okay, so you're a friend of the pod. You've been on the pod before, so I'm very appreciative of you coming back to do this for our leadership series. The first question I've been asking all the candidates so far is, who are you as a person? So I think when we talk about politicians, they give you a laundry list of their experience. They talk about their ambitions for things. And, that's all well and good. But I don't think that tells you enough about somebody as a person. Yeah. So setting aside your political career and your ambitions, what should people know about you as a person?
So I grew up in North York. My mom was a single mom. And that's shaped me over the course of my life. And it's really where my values come from, right? Hard work, patience, deep respect for public institutions that really gave me a fair shot. Like many folks, most folks that are here, right? Their family came from somewhere else, right? So my family also came from somewhere else. My grandfather came from Croatia in the 1950s, and he worked on a farm in Bradford, and actually doing the job that temporary foreign workers are doing today in farms all across Ontario. But he got to come here and be able to build a life. So a lot of my just beliefs and who I am comes back to that. And it's that kind of Croatian, German, and then Maltese side as well. Kind of call myself, I guess, a European mutt in some ways there. But we're all, from different places, right? And that mix has shaped really how I see the province and how I see the world around me. And folks who worked hard showed up and just wanted to get ahead. And I'm always the kind of person that I'm very practical. I like to fix things. I believe very strongly in impact. I don't care for the spotlight, really. I just want to put my head down and do the work. Now, obviously in politics, it's a little bit different because you are front and center, right? In doing that. So folks that know me know that I work really hard. I'll read the materials. I'll sweat the details. I'll show up early and really, do that kind of work. And for me, I take some joy in working out and cooking. I love to smoke meat. I don't nearly get to do it to the level in which I did before. And part of working out is, you can work out so that you can eat all the stuff that you really want to as well. So that's a little bit about me and kind of my background and family and kind of what informs me.
Yeah, I mostly just do that latter part. I should probably do that former part. What hobbies do you have? Like, I think most politicians, if they have some me time, they usually do it like running or something like that, because again, keeps the body fit, keeps the mind fit, all that kind of stuff. Kathleen Wynne famously did that. Mark Carney is a big runner as well. So the physical activity piece is a part of it. But, in chatting with some of the other leadership candidates, I've found out about some interesting hobbies that they have. Do you have any? And what goes into the smoking of meat, and what is your meat preference for that also?
Preference is ribs. Hands down, you got to do it for at least 6 hours. The best thing ever I smoked, though, was a rack of lamb. And it doesn't take that long. So it's pretty awesome. In terms of hobbies, though, really NFL football. And when the football season is on, I've been in a fantasy league for, probably over 12 years now. So I'm always every week trying to set my lineups and pick new players so that I can compete. So that's actually a hobby that I have that I enjoy. And in the legislature, actually, I think the premier knows I like football. So in one of the questions, he did respond to me. He said, "Oh, the member was too busy watching football." But what I actually wanted to retort back was, and I didn't get to, because he did it on the supplemental questions. So for the people watching at home, if you don't know how it works in the legislature, you get a question, then a supplemental question, typically. So he responded on the second question I asked, and that means I don't get to say anything after. So he said, "Oh, the member was too busy watching football." And what I wanted to retort was, well, actually, I was coming back from your Labour minister's riding on Sunday night.
Are you any good at your fantasy football league?
I have won. I'm a two-time champion. So some years you'll do well, and then some years you'll just be in the bottom. Sometimes it is what it is. It's based on your draft and all of that. So I have a lot of fun with that. I do like watching football. I started watching more CFL going back into last year. I went to an Argos game, and it was Argos versus Ticats. And I didn't have a team in the CFL at that point. And I messaged some of my friends in Hamilton and I said, so I'm watching Argos Ticats. What do you think? They're like, go Ticats, go Ticats. I said, okay. So I made a commitment. I said, depending on how each team plays, that's the team that I'm going to support in the CFL. And Hamilton played better. And frankly, the fans there are extremely passionate. And some friends of mine have invited me to go down to a game. So hopefully I'll be able to do that. And yeah, so I guess I'm a Hamilton Ticats fan just based on how they performed. Now, for folks who know football, will say, well, they have the same colors as the Pittsburgh Steelers. I say, well, that's fine.
The skeptic in me thinks this is actually just a really long play in case Steve Paikin ever does a leadership debate moderating it. And then, you have an in with him as a big Ticats fan. I want to talk about your agenda. So, your background in politics, you've been a staffer, you've been a consultant, largely, I would say, focused on education as an issue. And I think when people get involved in politics, some people, as we know, get involved in politics to be someone, and some people get involved to do something. And, your background in education suggests the latter. But Greg Sorbero is very fond of saying, there's only so many things you can get done in government. So pick, the 1, 2, 3 things that you really, really want to get done and focus on those things because it's going to take a very long time. For him, it was the subway extension and a few other pieces. What would that list be for you if you were to become premier? What are the, 1, 2, 3 things that you really want to get done in office?
So, I want to do this because it's really the Ontario I grew up in. We're a kid that grew up in a 1-bedroom apartment that can go to a great school, go on and earn an MBA and have a career in public service. And that is really slipping away, I think, for folks. So part of why I'm running is to put that back within reach for young people. When I think of politics and really policy more than anything, I'm thinking 10 years, 20 years down the road. What do we need to do now so that 20 years from now, when I'm going to be probably in my 60s at that point, that the healthcare is there for when I need it, right? That, if for folks who have kids, that their kids are just having kids, they're going to be able to get ahead 20 years from now. So for me, I think the very foundation to that is build a modern economy where it works for people. Not just folks who are well connected, right? And for me, that's research and development, that's innovation, that's growing Ontario's economy from within, regional economic growth and development. There's some fantastic work already happening at our universities and at our colleges. So if we don't get that piece right, you can't do any of the other things. You can't make life more fair. And to grow our economy from within, that will take some time. So I think on day one, we need to have a very strong plan that is going to be specific in growing our economy. Because again, we can't then do some of the other things. And, that's supporting our small businesses, that's skilled workers, manufacturers, but that's innovation, that's research and development. I was at a dairy farm and it's fascinating. The cows on the farm are getting milk through machines now, and machines that are more efficient. And we asked, well, where does that machine come from? Well, it came from Holland. It came from the Netherlands. What can we be doing here in Ontario so that we've got Ontario businesses being created, creating jobs here in the province, anchoring them in the province and exporting to the world? That's, if we want to be successful as a province, that's what we need to do. So baseline, we need to build a strong, modern, forward-thinking economy. It's not just let's bring foreign manufacturers here, which is really important, but it's how do we grow our economy from within? So I think that's the difference in approach that you would see, frankly, between an Ontario Liberal government under me and the current approach of this Doug Ford PC government. They're not focused on that. I introduced a bill in the legislature to create an AI talent and innovation strategy. I did that because I'm thinking 10, 20 years down the road. We need to get ahead of these things now. So either we can shape the future of AI or we're going to be shaped by it. And if we get shaped by it, our productivity is going to continue to go down. The amount of money that we have in our pocket is going to diminish, and our quality of life is going to get worse. So that basis, grow a modern economy. Secondly, I would say we really need to fix the basics and make life more affordable for folks. So that means real action on housing, lowering the cost of getting around the GTA. And cost isn't just a money thing, it's a time thing as well. And then ending kind of the era of hidden fees and gouging, whether it's ticket resales, like I did a big push in the legislature around that the government finally responded to. It took them 7 or 8 years to actually go back to what Ontario Liberals were trying to do 8 years ago, or whether it's just things on hydro bills. Folks in my riding, folks in my community in Ajax, they're worried about, can I put my kids in soccer this summer? That's the cost of living decision that people are making right now. Can I afford to put my kid in sports? Can I maybe afford, to go travel somewhere on vacation, whether it's here in the province or somewhere else? Let alone folks at the bottom end of the income ladder that are just struggling, frankly, to survive in our precarity in housing, right? The last thing for me is rebuilding our public healthcare and education systems as the great equalizers they're supposed to be. You should be able to get a family doctor when you need it. You should know that if you get sick, the care is going to be there. And for me, it's scary, right? So my mom's 65 this year, and the roles have reversed, right? So I'm now helping her. And if you go into an ER, it's scary. It is really scary. I've had constituents come to me saying my parent's been in the hallway for 3 days in the ER, and she's getting hospital dementia and doesn't know where she is anymore. Like, that's really scary. And that's not, frankly, a modern society. That's not a fair society. Like, it's wrong. It is wrong. There's some serious problems in healthcare. And if we don't have the team and the plan, we're not going to be able to fix it. And I know as Ontario Liberals, we will, because we've got a great healthcare team. We've got great people that are going to be giving advice. But we need even more. We need everyone around the table to do that. For me, it's education is that foundation to the strong economy. You should be able to go to a good school. It doesn't matter where you are in the province. It doesn't matter what your income is. It doesn't matter your postal code. You should be able to have a fair shot at success, because that's what I had growing up with the public schools that I went to. And I've worked in public education. I've seen it. Not every school is a great school, but it can be. And we're seeing that diminish over the last 8 years under this PC government. There was an Auditor General report the other day around special education and kids with special needs not getting the support that they need. And we already know this, but holy smokes, it is bad. And we're not able to retain folks that are the EAs in the classroom and educators. People are burned out. There's a violence in schools problem. And when I look across the legislature, I see, frankly, a minister and a government that doesn't give a damn about those kids. They don't care. That's wrong.
So you mentioned, the need to build a team. And I think this is something that, people in the party have been thinking about for a while. Despite losing 3 general elections, we still have a really robust Liberal family across the province. We have a lot of volunteers, a lot of strong riding associations, and, there's work to be done. But there is still that base there that is really strong, has a skill set, can be utilized, perhaps better than we have in recent years. So, one of the most important questions I think out there when it comes to party rebuilding is, how would you engage, support, and leverage the talents of that group? Because I think we have been underestimating and underutilizing our volunteers for years.
I couldn't agree with you more. I've been involved at the grassroots of our party for more than 15 years. I've been a riding president. I've run campaigns. I've done just about everything on a campaign, being sign chair, for example, as well, right? Which is a lot of work. There's a lot of things that go into this behind the scenes. And, when we look at, Central Party and the campaign and what happened, there is a lot of folks in our party that want to put up their hand, that want to help. And I want to build a party that doesn't matter if you've got 20 years of experience, or you're walking in campaign office or joining and becoming a member for the first time. If you want to be able to put up your hand and do something to help grow our party, to help build our party, you should be able to do that. It is as simple as that. And we don't have a culture within the party right now, in my view, that encourages that welcomes that. We need to change that culture because we've got so much great talent on the bench. We've got former staffers, former candidates, people policy, and organizers. We can't forget organizing on the ground. That's how you win elections, by knocking on doors. And I want to build a policy and a campaign apparatus that gives those people a seat at the table. That's what I'm trying to do with my campaign already. And I think back to the last cycle, there was this big call out, right? Saying, oh, we need your help. Please sign up. And then a bunch of people signed up and then never got a call. Like, if we are not prepared on the back end to be able to support that, then don't do the call out in the first place, quite frankly. Like, we need to think about those actions, right? There's no shortcuts to success on this, right? I think rebuilding our party is going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a leader who's going to be committed to traveling the province. And if we can get 5 people in a room somewhere, and let's say in Stratford, for example, right? Well, the next time we go back, I want us to get 10 people in the room. Then I want us to be able to get 20 people in the room. There are no shortcuts to success. We need to build a very strong foundation as a party. And that means showing up in every corner of our province, because as I've been traveling our province now for the last 6 months or so as a critic, as exploring the leadership, like, people say, wow, thanks for coming. Or we haven't seen a Liberal here in God knows how long. Like, we need to be on the ground winning hearts and minds. Sure, we can do some stuff through social media, through our phones, and that's a good way to stay connected. But we need to show up. So we need to have year-round engagement within our party, not just scrambling because we're going into an election, right? That means building riding associations in every corner of our province, because I think we've got about 40 or so that are just dead, that are completely dead and not active. Like, how are we going to be able to compete as a party if we don't fix those things? We need to empower our riding associations. Candidate recruitment that starts right after the leadership, not right before the writ's going to drop, and not halfway through the campaign like we've seen in some places. Like, in Ajax, my first day knocking was the first day the writ dropped. We had 28 days. And we had some money in the bank, thankfully. But over those 28 days, we built a campaign that people in the community came into the campaign office at the end and said, how can I help? That's incredible what we were able to do. And we need to do that all across the province. The last thing I'll say is maybe 2 things. I know what it feels like in our party to give those evenings and weekends and watch the result on election night and wonder if people noticed. So we need to say thank you to people. We need to appreciate our volunteers. We need to appreciate the people that give us money. We need to appreciate, frankly, the base that kept the lights on the last 3 elections. And I think that our members in our party deserve a leader who treats them as a partner, who treats them as equals. Because when I talk to folks, I say, sure, I'm an MPP. Sure, I'm running to be leader. But we actually should have the same voice within the party because we're both party members. That doesn't change. Just maybe my title and position's a bit different, but that doesn't mean that somebody who's walking in shouldn't be able to have a voice within the party. That's what we need to do. And if we don't get that right, I don't think we're going to succeed. We need to get that right.
I really appreciate that stewardship piece, because that's something that I've worked on in my time in the party. Of, we need to say thank you to everybody. We need to, if we're going to make an ask to people, we need to then follow up on it. We've seen this with, welcoming people to the party. We create a whole thing about, here's how you get involved, all that kind of stuff. And then nobody ever hears back. Or, someone makes a donation, no one ever hears back. There's all these different examples of no one ever hearing back. And I think that is one of the biggest hangups we've had in the party. I do want to talk about your local campaign, because I think it's pretty instructive of the work that we need to do as a party. When I think of, the past Liberal governments, first-term governments we've had with Peterson, McGuinty, and Wynne, all of them came in on a surge of new support. And, that tends to happen when you form government. That's usually how you form government. But it wasn't all just people who have always said they were Liberals, right? Or even just people who have always leaned Liberals. There was also people who had voted NDP and PC in the past, and we appealed to both sides of the spectrum there to win our majorities across the province, in rural ridings and urban ridings, all that kind of stuff. How would you reach out to voters beyond our existing, support base to expand the party's voter pool?
Simple, good government. We need to have a competent, honest government that is going to make people's lives a little easier. That really does, I believe, be in the center. And I know how to do it. I did it in Ajax, one of two to defeat a sitting PC incumbent. We won by 331 votes. We won because we listened more than we talked. We won because we were practical, because we campaigned and spoke about local issues and connected that to the role that the province plays in people's lives. I think swing voters and many voters, they're not necessarily ideological. I think people are tired. People are busy. I think back, to my mom, when she's voted in elections, sometimes you're looking at the headline, right? You're too busy. Let's say you've got a family, you've got kids. You're thinking about, how am I going to get the kids ready? How am I going to get to work? And how am I going to be able to do that just in time? Right? That is really the average voter. That is Ontario. That is most people in our province. Most people in our province aren't going to be watching this podcast. Maybe I hope that they do, because then they can learn a little bit more about me, and we'll try and make it go viral. How's that? But most folks, they're just looking at the headlines. They're looking at what's on CP24, and they're not happy with where things are going in this province. So in Ajax, I flipped a lot of voters that were tired of the wasteful spending. They were tired of Premier Ford saying, we're going to build a tunnel under the 401. Constituents were laughing to my face when I brought that up, that's what the Premier wants to do. They were bringing it up because they know it's not real. They know it's not sensible. They know it's not practical. When they closed the Science Centre and said, we're going to move it down to Ontario Place. And then when they find out what the cost of that is, to do that, it's going to cost $1 billion. To keep the Science Centre where it is and make it nice and new and ready for a new generation of kids to inspire that wonder and spark in science, it would cost $250 million. So that's an extra $750 million that we're going to spend on a science center in downtown Toronto. That's going to be harder for some people to get to. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of schools that you can build. That's a lot of recreation facilities. That's a down payment on electrifying the GO line and doing those early works. Like there is an infinite amount of money. So when I talk to folks, honestly, they just want good government. They want a government that's going to be honest, that's going to deal with the basic challenges that we face in our day-to-day lives, whether it's healthcare, education, getting around, commuting, right? GO trains that run on time, family doctors that they can see, right? Housing that doesn't, take up half your paycheck, right? And wondering, am I going to be young people, of folks really from the generation, I would say, after me? I'm 37. So when I'm talking to folks in their 20s, it's, am I going to be able to get a good job? Am I going to be able to afford to buy a home one day? Like, we need to get back to simple, practical. And that's really, I think, been our lane as Ontario Liberals: pro-growth, pro-public service, pro-people. That's where David Peterson won. That's where Dalton McGuinty won. And in 2014, that is where Kathleen Wynne won the first time. We need to plant our flag there and have those honest conversations. I'm not going to write off any voter, not NDP voters that feel that, frankly, their party's drifted from working people, which they definitely have. Not PC voters that are embarrassed by the jet, the FOI changes, the graft that you see with this government, and not people who stayed home because, frankly, no party really gave people a reason to show up, right? That's what we need to do if we're going to be successful. I did that in Ajax, and I know that we can do that across the province. As I was at the Ontario Small Urban Municipalities Conference. It's, think of, again, places like Stratford, Parry Sound, other cities in our province that are in rural areas. And I delivered remarks there. And we worked really hard on those remarks and really thought about, what communities are looking for, what municipal mayors and councillors dealing with budgets and pressures and infrastructure pressures and all of that, what they're looking for. And after I spoke, somebody said to me, "You sound pretty good for a Liberal." Right? And I'm like, wow, okay. So when I talk about how are we going to win people's hearts and minds, we need to get out there and do that in person and have those conversations. Somebody after came up to me and was complaining about, well, when you guys were there, you guys did that. And I said, well, look, I know you heard my remarks, and, don't judge me for the sins of the past. This is what we as a party in the legislature, our caucus, believe in, and are talking about, that local matters, that local decision-making matters, that you can't run a province as big as ours out of an ivory tower down at Queen's Park, whether it's on health, whether it's on education, right? Whether it's conservation authorities, strong mayor powers, municipalities, all of these different things. We're a very big province, a very diverse province, and every region is different. So what works in Windsor might not work in Thunder Bay, because the issue in Thunder Bay is, and in Northwestern Ontario, there's more jobs than people. They need people coming there. Well, the issue in Southwestern Ontario, and in Windsor in particular, it's the highest unemployment rate in the province. The issues are different. And the approaches that we need to take as a government and both locally also need to be different. So we need really smart people around the table. We need people that care about their communities around the table. We need to listen. And then we need to present folks with a plan that is going to speak to those issues. I think that's how we win. And I think we do that by, again, just simple. A good government, competent, honest government that's going to make your life a bit easier. I think that's how we can flip a lot of those voters.
So speaking of sins of the past, I want to talk about, what the party has gotten right and wrong over the last little while. And it's really a two-part question. Because the first part is, we governed for around 15 years under McGuinty and Wynne, and we got a lot right. And, Dalton McGuinty, he had a famous saying that we got the big things right. That's what he would always say.
Yep.
And I suspect Premier Wynne had felt the same way as well. But that doesn't mean we didn't get some things wrong as well. So, you were not a part of that government. You were not in caucus at that time. You are very removed from that time in the party. What do you think, from an outsider's perspective and from somebody who's hoping to reshape the party, what do you think we got right during that time, and what do you think we got wrong in government?
Well, I was always involved at the grassroots, right? So I never worked at Queen's Park, and I think that serves me, pretty well in opposition, because I don't think like the way that we would be in government, especially being in opposition right now, because we've got to go after the government and present ideas. But what did we get right? We believed in public institutions and invested in them. Full day kindergarten, right? It's a fixture of our education system and family life that no party will ever dare to reverse. Like that, and that is saving families money as well, right? And giving our kids a better shot at success, right? We expanded post-secondary access. So we got that right. We had a minister of research and innovation. The PCs gutted that when they came in, because it shows that they don't believe in investing in those things that are going to really, truly grow our economy. We put climate action on the agenda. We don't have smog days in the GTA anymore because the coal-fired plants were closed. And we modernized social policy in ways that, sometimes, we take for granted, right? Was it perfect? No. But we got some of those really big things right. And we need to go back to that. We need to be bold and we need to lead on it. Now, what did we get wrong? I think as a party, we lost touch with people. We lost touch with everyday people, the cost of living anxiety. We forgot, we didn't talk anymore to people who have to shower after a day of work, right? We don't do that anymore as a party. That's not a good thing, because we need to be able to speak to everybody and understand where everyone is coming from. Hydro bills became a symbol of the government, and that was making big bets on things without explaining them, without explaining why, as a government, they were doing those things, right? We lost touch with people, quite frankly. And for me, if I have the privilege, and it's a privilege to be there, we can never lose touch of that. I want my team, I want people around me to challenge. And I want them to challenge themselves, because we can never, ever get caught in that again. No government should get caught in that again. We're seeing that actually happen right now with the Ford PCs. They've lost touch with reality. They've lost touch with everyday people. We have a premier that's, I think, more focused on his legacy, reshaping Toronto's waterfront. It's always Toronto's waterfront. It's like the rest of the province doesn't exist. It's wild. It is wild. But if you actually look at it, there's a through line to him being on council. All of the things that him and his brother spoke about when they were on city council in Toronto, that's now what they're focusing on in the waterfront. I wouldn't be surprised if they start talking about a casino next.
I take your point very much, because I think Premier Ford has spent more time complaining about not getting to have his jet than, the struggles people are having to afford rent every month, or their mortgage payments, or put food on the table. Like he has seemed more focused on, if you go look at the press conferences, he's talked more about that than what people are actually going through.
So for me, just around our past history, to wrap that up, is I think we've got to talk to people where they're at about their bills before we talk to them about our vision. We need to listen. We need to be bold. And I respect the people who served in those governments. And it's hard. It's hard to be an MPP. It's hard to be a minister. It's hard to be the premier. It's hard to be the staff behind it. So I don't think, we need to run from our record, but we can't pretend, right, that things were perfect before either, and that we need to learn. And that's the kind of culture that I want to see within the party, within government, if we have the privilege to really do some great things for the people of our province.
The other half of that question is our time in opposition. We have spent enough time there now that we can start to evaluate what we've done there and what needs work. When I asked Lee this question, she has a similar experience to you. She has spent time in opposition as not a member, and also as a member. And, my joke with her was, oh, did things get better as soon as you got them? She could be the same with you. Obviously, there's the introduction of LCSB again, and there are some other factors there. But given all the time we spent in the political wilderness, it's 8 years at this point, what do you think the party has gotten right in opposition, and what have we got wrong?
Well, a couple things. I think what we got right is we held together as a party. I remember going to a provincial council meeting. I think that was in September after the 2018 election defeat. And we were having fun about it. We were not happy that we weren't in government. People weren't happy. But we were also trying to have fun, where I think somebody had stickers. It was like, get in the minivan, right? Like, let's start owning it, right? And let's have some fun about it. So a lot of people, though, in our province, frankly, wrote our party off after that. We didn't disappear. We had some consistent growth and success. And, credit to our last leader, Bonnie, where we did get the party status. And she helped us get there. And I don't think we can forget that. And now we've got LCSB, our Caucus Service Bureau, as you said, and that's a real achievement, right? And a credit to really the thousands of volunteers across our province, to our wonderful caucus, and to John Fraser, who is our interim leader now for the third time in the legislature. But it's wild, right? Because it's been 8 years since we've had a permanent leader of our party in the legislature. We can't continue to do the same thing and expect a different result. So that needs to change, in my view. I think what we got wrong is we let parts of the province slip. In the last campaign, I don't think we went west of Kitchener-Waterloo. This is a big province. And maybe, sure, we're not polling as well in some of these places, but we also just didn't have organization, right, on the ground. I went to Sault Ste. Marie, and I asked someone, I went to Sault Ste. Marie in the fall as critic on economic development. And I asked someone, I said, when was the last time we were there? And the response was, oh, when the last leadership. I'm like, sorry, what? That's wild, right? We can't do that. That's not acceptable. And then we nominated a candidate halfway through the RIP period there. So it's no surprise that we only got 10% of the vote there, because we didn't show up. We didn't put the work in on the ground. And I don't think you can run a serious campaign that way. One of my core fundamental beliefs in politics and life is people care about their communities. They care about the street that they live on. They care about the park that's down the road, and the local school and the local hospital. They care about, in Ajax, we've got a fantastic waterfront. And as a party, during campaigns, but all throughout, we need to talk to local issues. We need to make those connections and tell people how we are going to make their life better, how we are going to improve public services. Like, that's just a core fundamental belief for me, because we all care about where we live. We care about those things. And we need to be able to speak to people in that way. When I travel the province, people tell me, again, thanks for coming, right? It's wild. And when I respond, I say, don't worry, we'll be back. I'll be back. It's showing up over and over. That's actually how Dalton rebuilt our party in the late 90s, going into 2003. It was Dalton, a couple people in a car, traveling the province, showing up, organizing, listening to people, and building. And if we look in 2003, we won in rural Ontario. We won in all parts of the province. We won because we had great local candidates. We won because we showed up. We won because we had organizing behind us on the ground. I don't want in the next election the PCs sending people into our held ridings, or maybe more swing ones, to protect them. I want them defending their own turf in every single area of this province. We need to go on offense. That starts with a strong foundation. That starts with a strong team. And we need to go on offense. So what I've been doing in the legislature is trying to go on offense. In Belleville, Loyalist College, there's a culinary program that was there that is shut down. But what's wild is that there are local employers in Prince Edward County that rely on that program to get well-trained culinary graduates to work in their hotels, to work in their restaurants, to work on the wineries. Well, now that program is gone. So there's job demand there. There's people who wanted to go on the program, but that program isn't there because of a provincial government that doesn't believe in investing in our colleges and our universities as tools to support regional economic growth and development. There's a huge gap there. And it's not just there. I can tell you in Windsor, at University of Windsor and St. Clair College, the entrepreneurship centers aren't operating the same way they were before. Sorry, don't we want people to start businesses and identify opportunities and have that mentorship and support? Well, it's pretty hard to do that if you're not getting that support there. That's because the provincial government has lost touch with how do we actually grow our economy? How do we support people? How do we give people new opportunities? I'm always amazed here in Ontario, because if we look at the United States, their productivity is much higher than ours. They invest in research and innovation. They invest in research and development. They invest in those things. We don't in Ontario. So we've got a lot of opportunities. And here's the thing between us and the US. We've got healthcare. We have public healthcare. In the US, you need to have a job or be able to afford to pay for private insurance. We have the foundation for people to start businesses. And we need to start reorienting our thought, our thinking as a province into driving that. And that starts at the education system. So I think, just to go back to our party being in the wilderness, I don't think the fix is complicated, but it isn't quick, right? We need to be present everywhere. We need to recruit people early. We need to build local capacity, and we need to lead with what we'll actually do as a party, not what Doug Ford is doing wrong.
So you've mostly covered off my next question, which is about regional rebuilding. So,
Right.
when I look at the history of the party, when Peterson came in 85, they won seats that we hadn't won in a generation. In 2014, there was, 2-3 seats that hadn't been won in over 100 years that we suddenly won. So it wasn't a case of even just winning back seats we had lost in the minority years. We had won in new places, which I thought was a really, really interesting thing. And, at this point, the party has not won a seat outside of the GTA or the Ottawa area since 2018. I have to say GTA because, of course, you have added the GTA piece to that conversation, winning your riding. But how do you think we can rebuild in every region of the province when, I think for perhaps the last even 15 years, I think we have pulled back and tried to slice and dice the pie in smaller and smaller ways just to get, we always talk about vote efficiency. Like, I don't think that's actually a point of pride. I think that's a point of saying, oh, we're not doing the outreach. We're not trying to get out there in every corner. And I have seen a lot of central campaign teams basically write off whole swaths of the province. And, maybe during a RIP period, you do that because you have to concentrate on where you think you can win, but we are not doing the in-between work in those communities anymore. How would you rebuild across every part of this province?
So it starts with the party, and I want people within our party to be the voice of their communities, of their regions within the party. So that's that two-way relationship that we need to change and that we need to actually create within the party, because I don't believe we really have that two-way relationship, number one. But then number two, it goes to, I want candidates who hopefully will be MPPs that are going to be their community's voice at Queen's Park, not the other way around. So that's just kind of where I start with, and maybe in the longer way of what's the vision, what's the values, what's the approach that I think we need to have. It's kind of interesting. I'm the only Ontario Liberal MPP in the 905. The only one without that doesn't represent a riding with a 416 or I think 613 area code. Like, that's wild. So I take this personally, right? We can't be a party of downtown Toronto, right, and just expect to govern Ontario, right? It's a big province. So step one, I think, is showing up. I've been doing that already, doing that work, whether I was in, again, Sault Ste. Marie, meeting with all the local players there. And then what happened, and I asking them, well, what do they need from the province? Not saying, here's what we're going to do as Ontario Liberals. And when Algoma Steel, unfortunately, announced that they were laying off 1,000 workers, I was then able to go back to my contacts there and call them and say, hey, what's the impact? What do you need? And then because I had been there, I was able to get media on talking about the issues, the Algoma Steel issue in particular, where it's, comment from Marit Stiles, the leader of Ontario's New Democratic Party, and then me, because I had been there and understood what some of the local issues and challenges were. That's what we need to do. We need to start showing up and building that relationship. Like, people, like the Premier jokes, everybody has my number. Well, in some ways that is it is a good thing, right? That he is accessible to some mayors and other people. I'm the same way. I give my number out to just about everybody. And I want to be able to have those relationships with people who may or may not be liberals, quite frankly, because it's not a liberal thing. It's about governing for everyone. And it's about advocating for local needs in local communities. Our province is such a big place, and we need to respect the different regions as part of the province. The need of a forestry town in the north is very different than somebody who might be working in tech in Kitchener-Waterloo, or who's a farmer in Huron-Bruce, or a Francophone family in either the north or the east of the province, or really in Ajax in some ways, because everywhere in our province, we've got some great French schools. So we need regional platforms outside of just a provincial plan. Some of the issues are similar, right? The education issues are pretty similar. But as you travel and you start learning and talking to people on the ground, there are differences. So one example, there's a smaller Catholic school board that's rural, and in their local collective agreement, there's no cap on how many grades an educator can teach. But in the public board, there is. So you've got a teacher teaching 5 different grades. It's a small school, but 5 different grades in a class of 30. How can you reasonably be able to provide that attention for 5 different ages of kids? It doesn't make sense. So there are some of these things that I think we're going to need to fix that provides more fairness, frankly, and again, access, that opportunity to succeed. Number 3, I think we need to invest in candidates years out, not weeks out. I would recruit a senior organizer for each region with real authority, real budget, accountable to the leader. I think that's really important, is as the leader of the party, my job is to set that tone and that expectation of how we need to operate and interact with each other in that party. It needs to be a lot more open. And that's what I will expect of my team and the people underneath, because that is what we need to get back to, is everybody who's a member, if they want to put up their hand and do something, that they can do something. The last thing I'll say is we need to be a credible voice in between elections. We're able to drive stories in media from the legislature. I think that's why we need a leader in the legislature doing that work. So we need to tell the story, whatever issue it is, in whatever part of that province, We need to tell that story locally in those communities, because again, it goes back to people care about their local communities. They don't care about what crazy stuff Doug Ford's up to at Queen's Park. It gets attention. It's entertaining. Sure. It's very entertaining. Pouring out Crown Royal, very entertaining. But down in Amherstburg, at the Crown Royal plant, and I went to Amherstburg and I met with people in Amherstburg. You know what I found out when I was there? That this whole deal that the province made with Diageo, that owns that plant, the province did not fight to ensure that Diageo sells that plant to someone else. And there were interested buyers in that plant. And because that wasn't part of the deal with the province, now Diageo has been slow walking it. So we've got a plant that has power, that has water, that can be repurposed into something else, whether it's in spirits, whether it's in bottling. We have a facility there. And well, the province didn't have that as a requirement. And then as part of their deal, they only required that $500,000 that Diageo gives be spent within that community in Essex. Like, that isn't good government. That isn't responsive to a community that's already hurting. So we need to tell that story. And I've got some media on that and raised awareness of this, because this government isn't looking out for average people. This government isn't looking out for kids like me. They're not. That's what we need to change.
This next question, and again, I have 3 questions left, and we have about 15 minutes in your schedule. So putting that out there for our timeline. This next question, you and I think could probably spend a whole episode talking about. So we'll try and be briefer than we would maybe want to be on this. But I think one of the important questions in this age we're in is, how are we retooling campaign mechanics? So I think canvassing will always be a key part of campaign. So we'll, whether it's on the phone or at the door, I'm a big proponent of long canvases where we're actually having like deep conversations, like deep canvassing, as opposed to just using it as a head counting exercise. And, there has long been a complaint that, if you canvass too soon, the data grows old. I don't think that's true. I think these conversations are all relevant and help inform.
The data is terrible right now.
Right. So putting all that aside, we're also in an era now where I think our first touch and last touch with most voters will be digital. And I think that is where things are now. And we need to be updating our skill sets and our abilities and our tools as a party on the digital side of things. So the question to you, I guess, is, where does the party need to be dragged into this decade when it comes to campaign mechanics? And what are some ways that we need to just get back to basics?
I think the operative thing is we need to be dragged into this decade. Like, honestly, like the PCs, the federal liberals, they're running circles around us with voter content, the quality of our data lists, micro-targeting, fundraising technology, content production. Like, we need a serious investment at the party level into a modern data infrastructure that our riding associations can use, that our candidates can use, that our MPPs can use. The first thing after getting elected, I've been beating this drum quite a bit and making some progress on it. But boy, if I'm leader, we can make a lot more progress on it, because I understand how campaigns are run. I understand what we need to do, and I don't know everything, but I understand the basic mechanics of what we need to do, because I've lived it. I've lived it for more than 15 years within the party. We need to take short form video and creator driven content a lot more seriously. Doug Ford's really good at winning attention, right? He's good at winning that attention to try and win the argument. We need to be able to use tools, whether it's on social media or elsewhere, to communicate like real people, to be authentic. Like, just be ourselves. I think that's what I try and do. When I ran in Ajax, I said, you know what? I've got this opportunity that I pushed to make happen, and I'm going to be myself. And it worked. So I want to continue being me and being myself and doing it in a way that's authentic to me. I started posting videos like walking and talking. And some people were like, wow, those are really good. Did you have a script? No. I just said what was on my mind, and usually the first take is the best take. Honestly, because it's fresh in your mind. Then you start thinking, do I need to change this? Or just say it, right? we need to do more of that. We need to be more open in that way. I did social media.
I do appreciate you talking about, keeping up to date with the knowledge, because I think one of the struggles, there was a big piece released in the Bulwark yesterday, on the date that we were recording this, and it was talking about what the Harris campaign did in 2024 on digital. And one of the biggest takeaways was actually is that digital is not a separate department. It is something that is part of everything that we do as a political party. And you and I have had this conversation of, too often the principal or the person at the top has no clue about any of this stuff and also doesn't see the value in it. And I think that has that is a really big problem if that doesn't change. But the other conversation we've had is that you, as the candidate, don't have to know all the nitty gritty about, everything about how YouTube works or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think striking that balance is really important. And then having people who actually know what they're talking about on those fronts is really, really important. My pet peeve that there are people who come in who are really good at selling a product and then sell it, and then maybe it's not the best fit for our party's needs. So these are important things to think about. But I appreciate the focus on video. I know it's something you've been doing a lot of, and even on this podcast, most people who watch this podcast do so on their TVs on YouTube, and TV YouTube is the most used streaming service at this point, more than any of the other ones. And I don't know that our party has much of a YouTube presence at all. This is an aside, but I'm assuming you have thoughts on that, because I think that is a big area that we need to get into.
Absolutely. And we need, I think, frankly, a leader who will do this intuitively. I'm 37. I'm a generation that did grow up with some social media. I look at folks now who are in their 20s and they know more than I know, but that's okay. So I'm in this unique spot where I understand kind of where things are coming from, but then also where we need to go, just longer term down the road, because I have life experience. I have real experience right outside of politics. We need to be able to create content quickly and get that out there and strike when the iron's hot. I'm doing, I like to think, a pretty good job at that. I can always be better. I know our MPPs, some of them are very good at doing this as well, which is great. And we need to really build that as part of the toolkit, because campaigning is different. But we can't forget that we need to knock on doors. We need to have one-on-one conversations with people. There's no algorithm that's going to, replace that conversation where a parent has told me at the door saying, I'm thinking about putting my kids in private school because the education system isn't meeting my needs, right? We need to do that. My team in Ajax and myself, we were in, the top rankings around knocking doors in that election in such a short, cold writ period. And Ajax is flat. It's 85% homeowners. It's in the suburbs. It's not condos, it's not apartments. There's a little bit of that, but not much, right? It was outside, and you just have to do it. The other thing I'll say is that we need to have regular days of action, because you are only as good as your data. And if we are not collecting data and doing that on that one-on-one level, we're not going to have strong data. And then the experience that volunteers have matters as well. People give us their Saturdays, right? The least we can do is have a clean list, some coffee, thank you after. It's small stuff, but it's how we get people to come back.
So one thing you did mention there, which I want to talk about, is the attention economy, because I think Ford, perhaps no one other than Trump in modern politics is, if you go back to Diefenbaker, he was pretty good at it too, but there are very few leaders who are great at grabbing attention in the same way that Doug Ford is. People forget that Trump came and visited the Ford brothers before he entered politics, and I think he got a lot of lessons from those guys and is employing them now. But Ford is uniquely good at this in Ontario history, and it's a big part of why he has won back-to-back elections and is still in power in the province. But the struggle, I think, for the party is we can't just be following him on those issues. We need to be setting the agenda. So how do we pull Ontario's political agenda back from Ford and actually make sure that we're grabbing the attention of voters, but we're also able to set the agenda that we're talking to them about?
I think we need to respond quickly when issues do pop up to grab that attention. And look, Doug Ford's really good at one thing. He's good at dominating the news cycle. He's not good at running a province. That's the difference. So I don't think the strategy is to necessarily out Ford. I think it's to be real, authentic, to have fun in doing this as well. Otherwise, it's pretty depressing because sitting across from these folks, like, they don't care. Some of them don't care. And you can actually tell some of their MPPs that do care, but they have to vote a certain way because that's what the premier is telling them to do. So the strategy isn't to out Ford them, but I think it's to be the politician who answers the question voters are asking, right? Is somebody going to fix this? Right. So when we propose real solutions like capping ticket resale prices, bringing back the Express Go train in Durham region, developing an economy that is going to be modern and forward-looking. That's not a press release. That's a narrative. That's a story that we need to be building. I think we need to have a leader with a seat to have that fight in the legislature. And we need to force that choice, right? Every day, every week, I want people to see a contrast, right? Ford's buying a jet. We're saying we need an MRI machine. Premier's weakening FOI rules, hiding his cell phone records, us defending transparency and calling for an open government, right? Ford giving up on things like Algoma Steel, right? Like, the federal government has done a lot more and did a lot more of that hefty lifting than the province has. Us showing up, right? Like, those are the things that we need to do and build that narrative. And I want to be a human in public. Like, I think people are tired of talking points. They're tired of like I try and speak simply. I try and speak plainly, talking about, groceries, right? Like, can you buy a home, right? Like, somebody waiting 12 hours in the ER. Like, we have to be real. And that is the approach that I've tried to take to politics because it's who I am at my core. I wasn't born into money. I wasn't born into wealth. Didn't have anything growing up. I've worked really hard to, create a life and be able to do some really great things. And I hope that I'll have the opportunity to be able to do that across the province because that's what it comes back down to for me.
Final question, which is, to become premier, you first have to become leader. And to become leader, you have to win the leadership race. We obviously have a whole big, long process that's going to be taking place over the course of the year, culminating in a vote in November by the members. What is your elevator pitch to Liberal voters in that leadership race? And also, where can they go to find more information about your campaign?
So I'm asking members of our party and hopefully new members of our party for their support because I've shown recently and concretely that I can do the thing that our party needs to do the most, which is win seats that we shouldn't be able to win. Ajax was held by a sitting PC MPP. We took that seat. There is now a dot of red in a sea of blue. I want a sea of red. So I bring a couple things to this race that I think matters. A seat in the 905 that we can't afford to lose, a generational perspective on housing, affordability, the future of work, and really more than 15 years of unglamorous volunteer experience at the grassroots of our party, that I actually understand how this party works, how this party runs, and set that bar for my team that we're going to fix that. I've worked in housing policy for Anna Bailau, who is the deputy mayor of Toronto. I've worked in public education on the senior team. I've had a small business. I've sat at kitchen tables in my community and listened. I understand how government works and where it is. And so I'm not running to, settle scores or relitigate the past. I'm running to give our party and our province a forward-looking, practical, center alternative that can form a government, that can get the big things right, because we can't continue to do the same thing and expect a different result as a party. So our members in November are going to have a choice to choose a leader that has already proven they can beat a PC incumbent, who's shown that they can take on the Ford government in the legislature and all across this province, and someone who's committed to building our party in every single corner of our province. That's what I'm offering. And if you're interested in what I have to say, I encourage you to go to joinrob.ca and join us and be part of a team that is trying to do politics differently, that is trying to approach the way we view our party different than the past, is one that's going to be modern, forward thinking, and focused on winning.
Thanks so much for joining me, Rob.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Appreciate the time.
You've been listening to Progress Canada, presented by Lightbulb Narrative, a Canadian-owned company specializing in strategic communications, narrative development, and content creation. Our music today was composed by Elliot Middleton. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing to access future episodes the moment they drop. Thanks for listening.